So it's lesson 2, part 2. We've done a brief introduction to NPM, and let's play around with it. So if you want to open up a new browser tab and pop on over to the main NPM site, the URL is npmjs.com. So we're going to search for a package and install it and then use it in our project. Before we do that, we want to initialize NPM into our project. So I'm going to go back to my code editor. Probably just close up all our files. First, I'll clear out my terminal. So we want to initialize NPM with the command npm init. I'll also put in the chat. So we're going to initialize NPM here. And this is going to walk us through the process of creating a package.json file. So I'll hit enter. And it says the utility will walk us through creating a package.json file. It tries to guess sensible defaults. So the first item here is the name of our package, which defaults to our folder called lesson 1. So if I just want to accept that default option, I can just hit the enter key. Then it's suggesting a version code, and it's suggesting 1.0.0. So again, I'm just going to hit enter. The description, you can put in a description of the site if you want, or you can just hit enter to leave it blank. Our entry point, so this is going to be what is our startup file. For now, it has blocking. I'm going to change this to server.js. This will be our startup file. The test command we're going to ignore. So I'm just going to hit enter. Now, my folder is already tied to a Git repository. But if your folder is not tied to a Git repository, that's fine. Doesn't matter. You can just hit enter here. Keywords, this would be if we published our site to NPM, how would we want it to be searchable? We don't care about that, so I'm just going to hit enter. The author, I'll maybe just put in my GitHub username, but again, you can hit enter. You can leave it blank. It doesn't matter. The license, it suggests there's several different open source licensing schemes. Again, I'll just hit enter. And then it gives me a preview of a JSON file. It's about to write package.json. This is what it's going to look like. And it says at the bottom, is this okay with the default of yes? So you can just hit enter all the way through, really. We can always change this file manually. But using this little init command, it saves us the trouble of having to write out all this JSON and potentially have errors in it. So I'll just say, okay, my package.json file gets created here, and it looks exactly like the preview in our terminal. And we can make changes in here if we want to, like if we want to change the name or the version or what our startup file is, we can change any of these things here. It even will link to a README file, which right now we don't have. Okay, so I just ran npm init, and you could pretty much hit enter all the way through. I think the only thing we really changed was the starting point, which was server.js. So now that we've got our package.json file, I'm going to leave this file open. And we want to go find an NPM package that we can play around with. So I'm going to go back to the NPM site. Let's find a package that we can use to show the current weather based on a location. So in the search box here, just type weather. There's a whole bunch of packages for using weather data in a Node application. Let's just use this first one, this weather-js, a module for obtaining weather information. That's what we want. So let's click on it. And we can try out, not only is there the command, the installation command here, typically on NPM, there's also a README file that documents how do you use the package with sample code, and like this shows us sample output of how this works. So I'm just going to, over here under install, it's got this command npm I weather-js. I can copy that. I'll go back to my terminal and just clear it out with CLS. Wipes out everything that was there. And then I can just paste in that command. You could also just type it if you like, but when you copy and paste, it reduces the chance of a spelling mistake. So the command is npm I weather-js. So I'm just going to hit enter after that command. And it's going to go and fetch from the source repository. It's going to go and fetch weather.js. And now in my folder explorer, we can see I now have this new folder here called Node Modules. And if I open it, I get a whole pile of packages. Most of them are green. And here's our weather.js library. So this is the actual source code. We don't need to change it. We're just going to use it. So now the weather package is installed, and we can try it out. So now we've got, if we go back to NPM, there's some sample code here, which will show us the weather in San Francisco, California in degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm just going to copy that block, and it says the options here. We can change the location name or even provide a postal code. And we can also change the value of degree type if we want from Fahrenheit to Celsius. We'll try this example exactly how it is first, and then we could try to change the location and the degree type. So I'm just going to copy that block of code. Copy it to your clipboard. It's under the usage section here. And I'm going to make a new folder here. Sorry, whoops. I'm going to get out of my node modules, go back to my lesson 1. I'm going to make a new file. We'll just call it weather.js. And we'll just paste in this code from NPM. So what's it doing? We're including the weather.js module, which is inside, we can see from the path, it's inside our node modules folder. And then we've got a find method here with our callback. So we're passing in a JSON object with 2 arguments, 2 parameters, right? We have a value called search, which is a string. We're going to put in as San Francisco, CA. And then our second property is called degree type. It's also a string. And we're going to pass in this case, F. And this runs asynchronously. So here's our anonymous callback function. When we call weather.find, one of 2 things is going to happen. We are either going to get an error or some kind of result back. If we get an error, that error is going to get printed to the console. Otherwise, we are going to convert the JSON object, convert the value to a JSON string, and print that out in the console. So let's try this file out. I'll run node weather save my changes. I'll run node weather. And we get a whole whack of JSON data. It gives us the location, including the latitude and longitude coordinates of San Francisco, the time zone relative to Greenwich Mean Time, so 7 hours behind. Our degree type is Fahrenheit. It even gives us an image if we wanted to show a graphic of the current weather. I could even, let's just see. Oh, okay, blob doesn't exist. So the graphic doesn't, this gives us a 404. And now it gives us a whole bunch of weather data. It gives us the current temperature in Fahrenheit, 48 degrees, that it's cloudy. Gives us the humidity, the wind speed. It also gives us the forecast. Gives us yesterday's weather, today's weather, and then Saturday, Sunday. Gives us a 5-day forecast, including yesterday. So it seems to work. I'll just clear out my terminal. We could try to change this now. Maybe I'll put in, let's say, the college postal code, which is L4M3X9. And I want to see the weather. I'm going to change the degree type from Fahrenheit to Celsius. So let's see in metric, if I save my changes, if our weather widget gives us the local forecast here in Barrie. And you could try any city, any postal code. I know some of you may not even be here, maybe in other cities, other countries even. You can put in any location that you want. So I'm going to run weather again. And this time, what do I get? I get Barrie's coordinates. We're 4 hours behind Greenwich Mean Time. It's currently -21. Feels like -29. That seems about right. Our high today is -13. And we can see the forecast all the way through. A little warmer on Saturday, -6, -8. Snow predicted for us for Monday. So we could easily use this package if we want to be able to show the current weather. We are going to get it in JSON, and we could represent that in our, on a web page if we wanted to. We wanted like a little weather widget here. So this is a really simple example where we install a small package and it goes into our node modules folder. Now we also have the option to install a package globally. Most packages we install locally into a particular website or particular folder. But there are some development utilities that we might want on our machine for all of our node projects. And we're going to install one of them now. So one of the things you might remember from last week's class was that every time we made a change, remember when we were working on our server file, every time we changed this message, we had to stop and restart the server before the new code would take effect. So this gets to be a big pain in the butt. Right? We don't want to constantly have to stop and start our server every time we save changes. So there's an NPM package we can install globally on our system that will watch our files for changes and do an automatic restart every time we save a change. So we want to install that one, not just for our lesson 1, but we want to install globally so we can use it in any node project. So that package Sorry, my home phone's ringing like crazy and annoying the crap out of me. That package, there's a couple of people pronounce it different ways, is called Nodemon or Nodemon. So this is a tool that helps develop node-based applications by doing auto restarts whenever file changes are required. So we want to install this package, but we want to install it with this -G flag. This means install it globally. So it's not only available for our lesson 1 project, but it's going to be available in any project where we're working with Node. So down here in my terminal, I'm going to run npm I -G Nodemon or Nodemon, however you want to pronounce it. So I'm going to install this package. So now if we run let's say we run our web server from last week, we can see how Nodemon will do an auto restart and show any changes we make. So install it globally. Notice because I've used this -G, we don't actually see it in the list of node modules because we've installed it globally in our operating system. So I want to start our web server, but instead of using the node process that doesn't watch for changes, I'm now going to use the Nodemon package to run our application. We can then make changes and refresh, and we'll see those changes right away without having to stop and restart our server manually. So install Nodemon with the command I put in the chat, npm I -G Nodemon. And now I'm going to run Nodemon server. So last week we ran the server file with the node command. This time we're using Nodemon or Nodemon. I'll hit enter. It says, okay, we're starting the server. It's watching for changes, watching any files with the JS extension. And we got this message here. The node server is running on port 3000. I hate this WebEx toolbar, drives me nuts. So now I can go to localhost 3000. It sends the response we did last week, prints out hello world. This is our first node page. But now I can add something to this. And as soon as I save my changes, our server is going to restart and we should be able to see the change in the browser if I refresh it. So I'm going to add some more text to this response on line 9. Server now running with Nodemon. So as soon as I click Control S, you'll see my terminal. In my terminal, we're going to see that the server restarts. So I'm going to click up here, hit Control S, and it says restarting due to changes. And now it prints out the node server running on port 3000 again. If I refresh, we can now see the new change without having to do that manual stop start. So we're generally going to use Nodemon through the course. I'm going to use it most of the time because it just saves us a step of doing a manual stop and restart every time we save changes. Okay. you get an error every time. Okay. Yes, there is a common permission error that happens with Nodemon. Chris, can you copy and paste the error so I can see what it is, please?
Yes.
Does anybody else besides Chris have a Nodemon error? It's not uncommon. Right, yeah, that's the error that I thought. Okay. It's not digitally signed. Okay, and so this is a permission error. Okay, there is a fix for this. There's a couple of commands you can run. Okay, so I'll show you how to do this. I'll put the link in the chat. For most people, these first two steps fix it. So you're getting this error that Nodemon PS1 cannot run, that you don't have permissions. So if you search for PowerShell, Windows PowerShell on your system, and you choose Run as Administrator. Okay, so search for the word PowerShell and Run as Administrator. If you are on a Mac, you might need to use the sudo command when you might need to reinstall Nodemon, but make sure you use sudo. So you run it as administrator, and then you run this command, which I'll put in the chat as well. Set-execution policy space unrestricted. You can also try it this way. Set execution policy. Either of these should work. There are some other fixes in this link as well. Other people have suggested if you go here to your user directory, app data, roaming npm, you can delete the Nodemon PS1 file and then run it. Okay, Tanya, if you're getting app crash, Nodemon is working, but there's a syntax error probably in your code. So for example, if I leave out this bracket here and save the changes, right, it crashes. So Nodemon also makes sure your code syntax is correct. Yes, say yes, Jennifer. It's okay. So as soon as I fix the syntax error, it restarts. If Nodemon or Nodemon isn't working for you right now, don't panic. I mean, I can always help you after class fix it. You can, for now, if you need to, still stop and use the node process and just stop and restart your server. But the links I have found in the past, the suggestions on this Stack Overflow article, they do typically fix the Nodemon issue for most people. That worked? Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Colton, Chris, did that solve your problem?
I don't know. Let me check. Nodemon server.
Yep.
Yep, it's working.
Okay, good. Okay, great. Okay, so we've installed 2 packages so far. we've installed the weather package locally for use in our lesson 1 project. And we've also installed Nodemon globally so that we can use it in any of our projects. We're going to make one more file today, and then we will install one more NPM package for doing some currency formatting. Okay, so we're going to build a simple calculator, and then we'll add some formatting with an NPM package. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new file here, which I will call tax.js. So it's going to run as a simple web page where we can pass in to the URL as a parameter. We can pass in a numeric value, like a total, and we want to calculate and display the amount of tax on that value. And then we'll use an NPM package for formatting these values as currency. Okay, so first we will use Node's HTTP module to start a web server. So just like in our server file, we're going to require the HTTP library. And start server. So we're going to call the create server method with our anonymous function, which takes 2 parameters, our request and our response. And there's 2 round brackets here. Because our function is anonymous, again, we're using this fat arrow instead of the word function here. So far, the exact same code we used last week. We'll send our HTTP header. We're going to send our 200 with content dash type. Don't forget the dash there. Now, instead of text plain, we're going to use this instead. Our content type, we want to use HTML here. We're going to send text/HTML with our character set of UTF-8. So this will send an HTTP status code of 200, which is okay. And then we're setting our content dash type as text HTML. So we can include some HTML tags in our response. So far, we've just been printing plain text to the screen. We want to actually format our response with some HTML. Then we'll have our page content. So first we'll say response.write. For the moment, the only thing we're going to put in our response is an h1 tag. We'll say response.end. So right now, this is almost identical to what we had on the server page. The only difference is we've changed the content type from text plain to text HTML, and the response we're outputting is going to include some HTML. And then we'll say listen. Oops, sorry, my bracket, missed my closing bracket. So again, we're going to listen for request events on port 3000. Every time a request comes in, we're going to take the response parameter, send the header, send the content, and end the response. Okay, so almost the same thing as what we had in our server. Now my server's still active, right? It's still running. Right now, if I go to localhost 3000, it's loading our hello world page. So I want to stop the server and then use Nodemon to run it again, but this time rather than running the server page, we want to run the tax page instead. So I'm going to come down to my terminal. I'm going to hit Control-C to stop the server. And my page is should be offline now. It's unable to connect because we turned the server off. I'm now going to use Nodemon, but I want to run the tax page instead. So we'll now run Nodemon tax. Whoops, that should be Nodemon tax. Now when I refresh, instead of showing our server file, it shows our tax file, and we can see that the HTML works because our H1, if I inspect, right, our H1 tag is active. So it's running HTML. Or serving HTML, not just plain text. So ultimately what we want this file to do, okay, first I ran the command nodemon tax. So you might have to stop your server first. If the server is still active in your terminal, so first step is Control-C to stop the server. Second step, restart with nodemon tax. So the server starts, but this time it's going to serve this file instead of our server.js. And then in the browser, I just went to localhost 3000. So my server is running again, but it's serving a different page this time. Okay, give me a thumbs up if that's working for you. So we're stopping the server. We're restarting it. But now it's displaying our tax page.
Yep.
Okay. So what we want to do is be able to pass in as part of our URL something like this. Subtotal equals, let's say I pass in 100. If my URL is this, I want the page to say subtotal, $100, tax, $13, total, $113. So we want to read this parameter from the URL, then do a couple of calculations with it, and output all the values. So include nodes URL library. So Node has a library called URL, and we can use that so that we can read parameter values like this from our web address. So now we want to read the URL params. So this is kind of like a PHP get. So our URL method has a parse. So this allows us to read this part of the URL, the parameter name and value. So I'll create a variable called subtotal. So if we have a URL parameter called subtotal, again, this is kind of like so this would be the node equivalent of this syntax which we used last year in PHP. So this should give us the value of the subtotal parameter that we see in the URL. So this should give us a value of 100 or 95 or whatever this number happens to be. Now we want to calculate the tax and total. So I'll create a variable called tax. How would we figure out what the tax is? So we have a subtotal, we've got some number. What would we do with our subtotal to figure out the amount of HST? Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Tanya. So we can take our subtotal and multiply it by 0.13 because HST is 13%. You got it. Thank you, Jennifer, as well. What about the total? How do we calculate the total? So we've got a subtotal. We've calculated the amount of tax on that total, on that subtotal. Yeah, we could either multiply it by 1.13, or I guess that the other option is, yeah, we could just add them together, the subtotal plus the tax, right? And now we just want to display all the values. So we can use our response.write. So maybe we'll do it this way. We'll put on an H2. You know what? Maybe I'll use double quotes just for simplicity. Whoops. So H2 subtotal. I'll have to concatenate, sorry. Doesn't like me breaking this up. I think I'll have to do it this way. Just put the quotes on like this. Put all my literals in quotes. Happy now. So we're writing 3 H2s, each one that's got kind of a label and then our variable. So if I save my changes, Nodemon should restart. We can try this out. Let's see what result we get. Now remember, we need this parameter. I'll put the URL in the chat. We need this question mark subtotal equals at the end of our URL. This won't work if we don't have any subtotal value. So I'm going to try to run it. And, okay, it injected our variables right here, which we don't want. So we'll have to first do some concatenation. So before our variables, we'll close our quote. I honestly didn't expect that. I thought it would display our variables. But I'll just concatenate. I'll move the variables outside of the literal string. We'll save and try again. Oh, I'm an idiot. I'm sorry, folks. I'm getting my languages confused. was giving you PHP syntax. I apologize. Sorry. There's no $signs in JavaScript variables. My bad. Okay, so what's happened? It says my subtotal's undefined because I made a casing error. Here I've got it all lowercase, and here I used camel case. So I think we need a capital T here. Yes. So it is case sensitive. I gave you the wrong URL. So when I pass in 100, it gives me a tax value of 13. So that's right. But look at our total. What happened here? The tax is right. The total's not right. How come? It says my total is 10,013.
I think you didn't render it into a money format.
Correct. Yeah. So we'll add the formatting after. But yeah. So why does it print this out as 10,013? What do we or how do we fix this? Notice what happens when I mouse over. Look at my code editor. It says subtotal is a string and tax is a number. So it knows tax is a number, but it treats this as a string. So it's concatenating them together here. Right? But it's treating subtotal like a string. So how could we fix this? Yeah, we want to use the JavaScript, the parse float. So we can either do it here, or we can just convert it up here. So when it reads from the query, it reads as a string. If we convert it to a floating point number that includes a decimal, it now knows these are both numbers. So if I refresh now it's doing the math properly. And if I change to something else, that's good. So now it's working, but now we kind of come to the other issue, and Chris, I think you were leading this as well. We don't have currency formatting. So even though these values are correct, it doesn't look good. So what we want to do is add one more NPM package that will format these numbers as currency. It'll put in the $sign. It will also round the values to 2 decimals. We could do it manually, but there's a simple NPM package we can add that will do this for us. So we'll stop our server. And we're going to add one more package to our project. The package is called accounting. So I want to run npm I accounting. This is going to install the package just in our lesson 1 project. We're not installing it globally for all our projects. We only need it for this website. So again, stop your server with Control-C. And then we'll run npm I accounting. So this installs accounting into our node modules folder. And now we can use the accounting package to format all of our numeric variables. So we will add the accounting package for number format. So we're going to require it. We'll link to it up at the top with the other modules that we've got. So these 2 modules come with Node, and accounting we just installed manually. In our project. And now we're going to wrap these variables in a function that comes with the accounting library. So I'll just go and pull it up on the NPM site briefly so we can have a quick look at it. So it's a number, money, and currency formatting library. It's very popular, downloaded 250,000 times each week on average. And it says the documentation. So some developers publish the documentation right on NPM. Others you have to go to the GitHub. So here they've got a method called format money. So it will put in the server's current local regional currency symbol, commas. So we're going to use this format. We're going to wrap our values in this accounting.formatMoney function. So now my code editor, it recognizes the methods in our package. I'm going to call format money. First, I'll try it just around the subtotal. We'll make sure it works. And if it does, we'll wrap the tax and the total using this same function. I'm going to have to restart the server because we shut it off for a minute so we could install the package. So one more time, I'll run Nodemon tax. This should restart our server. So it's restarted, it's watching for changes. Smaller. So now when I refresh, my subtotal's formatted as currency now. So we want to apply it to both tax and total, because that'll give us the $sign and it should round. So tax should become 650. So again, we'll wrap the tax value. We'll pass it through our format money function. So it rounds up to 650. And our total should also be wrapped in our function. So we're not doing a lot with this NPM package, but it just gives us the formatting that we need for working with currency values. If I put in something large, it also adds the commas for values over 1,000. So, I mean, we probably could have used Java. We could put a currency, we could insert hard-coded $sign in and use, math.round with JavaScript. But easier just to use this little NPM package to handle that for us. Okay, so this file's complete now. We're done with it. I want to do one last tiny thing before we break for today, before I put this code up on GitHub. The node modules tend to get really big. Like if I go and look at this folder now let's go to my file explorer. So our lesson 1 folder, it's okay, it's actually not that big, but over time, the node modules tend to get really large. So much like with the NuGet packages in our Visual Studio projects, we want to exclude node modules from getting pushed up to GitHub. So I'm going to make a simple gitignore file that excludes the node modules. So when I push my code to Git, the node modules don't get included because these tend to get really big and bloated. It can be hundreds of megabytes. Right? Our package.json, it's also now tracking the dependencies we've installed. So we don't need to upload the node modules because the package.json, it will give us a list of the dependencies. So I'm going to make one file here, and then I'm going to push to GitHub, and then we're done. I'm going to make a new file, which I will call .gitignore. And we are going to ignore the node modules. So if I push this up to GitHub now, the node modules folder with all these NPM packages, it isn't going to get included. So the file name is .gitignore. We're going to add, we may add some other things to node modules later. We definitely will. So now I'm going to stop my server in my terminal. You don't have to upload your stuff to Git now, but I'll just show you when I upload to Git, the node modules will be excluded because of my gitignore. Git commit, lesson 2, part 2. We are using NPM. So I'll push my changes up to GitHub. And if we go and check our repository, I guess I better put that link on Blackboard for people. It's on Blackboard. The link, so here's my lesson. And I've got the gitignore, so you'll notice the node modules are not here. Okay, where to find the GitHub link, I will show you in a minute. So your checklist for next week, if you're watching the video, I just want you to go through these coding examples we did with closures and NPM. there's also a sample you can use. So I created my own git ignore. There's also this file from GitHub. So this is a sample git ignore file for Node with a whole bunch of other files that we might, most of these we don't care about, but you can see here's Node modules. Should be excluded. Okay, where do you find the link to my GitHub? Same place you would always find it, on Blackboard, in Weekly Learning, Tools and Resources. Here's the link to my repositories. There's the link to the YouTube playlist. So you can always find the link here. Okay, so there's no other homework for this week, just to finish the exercises that we've done together. Next week, we're going to start looking at Express and routing. So how do we handle different URL paths and load different files or send different responses? We'll work kind of with Express in a manual way. And then in 2 weeks, we'll look at using a tool called the Express Generator, which is kind of like a scaffolding tool that builds out an Express Node app using the MVC pattern. And then we'll work with the generator moving forward. But we'll kind of get our feet wet with Express first next week. And I will put this link on Blackboard as well about Nodemon. Make sure that you have access to it for anybody doing the lesson, watching the video, and if you struggle with that. So there's your Nodemon permissioner. Okay, any questions before we wrap up for today?